Threesome with the Neighbor, Threesome Erotica. Written by Vixen. Narrated by Jessica Howard. Grant walked into his bedroom, toweling his hair dry after a shower, but stopped and grinned as he saw his wife, Abby, looking out of the window. Her concentration was focused on whatever she was watching, and she seemed unaware of her husband's return. He slowly crept up behind her, his grin growing wider as he looked over her shoulder and saw what she was looking at. "Fantasizing again?" he said, and Abby jumped at the sudden sound of the voice in her ear. "What?" she protested. "I was just looking at the lovely day." "Uh-huh," Grant said, running his hands onto his wife's hips. "You looking out the window has nothing to do with Ethan next door being in the garden, then?" "No," Abby continued to protest, but her eyes ran over Ethan's naked chest and shorts. It was something she did whenever she got the chance, and she knew her husband was well aware of her dirty fantasies about Ethan. She pushed back a little and grinned as her ass touched on something growing erect against her. She wriggled against it, and the erection continued to stiffen against her. "Well, well," she teased. "Look who's having some fantasies of his own. Are you thinking about your wife sucking on Ethan's cock?" "Now that you mention it," Grant laughed and forced his hips forward to grind himself onto his wife's ass. "Maybe it's time for you to see if you can turn your fantasies to reality." Abby spun around. "Are you serious?" she said. Grant laughed louder as he heard the note of excitement in Abby's voice. "Sure," he replied. "Maybe you should lure your fantasy boy inside the house and see just what you can entice him to do." Abby slid a hand between their bodies and stroked the hardness through the towel. "Oh, yeah," she said. "I so want to do that." She moved her hand up to her husband's chest and pushed him backwards. He kept going until the back of his knees struck the edge of the bed and he fell down onto it. Abby was on top of him in an instant, opening up the towel so that his erection came into view. She grabbed at it, wrapping her fingers around the shaft and squeezing. "You really don't mind if I try and have some fun with Ethan?" she asked. "Mind?" her husband sputtered. "I want in on the action to see what you look like taking two cocks. The idea is such a turn-on." Abby squeezed her fingers tightly around her husband's cock. "So I see," she laughed, but released her grip a little so that she could stroke her fingers along the solid length. She leaned down to kiss her husband, her mouth finally moving away from his lips to slide down his body. She could feel his chest heaving as she stopped to tease his nipples, but moved on quickly, eager to get to his cock. Her mouth worked slowly across his midriff, finally coming to a stop when the wet head of the cock nudged the underside of her chin. She lifted up a little and looked down at the gorgeous sight, her passion rising at the prospect of the sex about to come her way, as well as the thought of getting to play with a 20-year-old. Abby bent down to caress her lips onto the erection and heard the moan of her husband. She looked up and grinned as she saw his eyes glued to her mouth. Flicking out her tongue, she worked a wet trail along the length to the tip and licked at the pre-cum seeping out. Wrapping her fingers around the base of the shaft, she held it straight up from her husband's body, moving her hair out of the way so that he got the best view of his cock disappearing in her mouth. As she pushed her lips lower on the shaft, Abby kept her tongue moving, licking around the hardness as it filled her mouth. The sensation brought out a louder moan from her husband, and she could see he was breathing heavily. Working her lips to the balls, she let him feel his cock deep throat in her mouth for a brief instant, pulling back up before she gagged. She started to bob her head down onto the erection, her lips clamped tightly around the thickness as they slid up and down. Abby quickly upped the pace, her excitement mounting as her husband pushed his ass up from the bed to force himself deeper each time she went down on him. His moans got louder still as the pleasure in his body grew, and she didn't let up on him, pushing him close to a climax. Grant suddenly pushed himself up from the bed and, grabbing his wife, threw her face down on the bed. She squealed as her skirt was forced up to reveal her panties and felt them being pulled down. The breath started to rasp from her as Grant reached for a pillow and forced it under her hips to lift her ass up a little. He straddled her body and sat down so that his cock pushed into her butt crease. He stroked himself onto his wife to heighten his desire and then grabbed her ass cheeks to pull them open. Abby moaned as the cock was pushed between her thighs, the head touching onto her wet opening. It teased around the wet skin before Grant pushed his hips forward to slide the cock inside. He shuddered at the feel of the pussy lips opening up, and when the tip of his cock penetrated the wet
Sample complete. Ready to continue?